The Bill Peters saga in Calgary is over. The Calgary Flames have just had a press conference announcing what's going to happen moving forward. We'll get into all the details coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we finally have some breaking news from the Calgary Flames organization after their investigation with the Bill Peters allegations and situation that's been ongoing now for the past number of days. Effectively, here from the press conference, General Manager Brad Treliving has confirmed that former head coach Bill Peters has resigned as head coach of the Calgary Flames. He was not fired. Apparently, he did send a resignation letter to the Flames and Brad Treliving this morning, which he said they accepted. So therefore, he's technically not fired. I guess the outcome technically here is the same, whether or not he's fired or resigns. Ultimately, he's not the head coach of the Calgary Flames anymore, but just like a lot of the other things that we've seen, like the apology letter from Peters, in this press conference from Brad Treliving, it sounded like it was very much lawyer speak for the most part, a lot of legalese taking place. Brad Treliving was very careful on how to answer many of the questions as well, which, you know, is a little bit frustrating for your average fan, because ultimately when you hear these allegations, it looks as though many of these allegations were proven to be true, as these stories were corroborated by several other players in both situations, whether it be the Akim Aliu situation in which he alleges racial slurs were yelled at him, and then there's the Carolina Hurricane situation with former player Michal Jordan indicating that he was physically punched, kicked, and had received basically physical abuse on the bench during play. We've heard cases of publicly as well as reports that both of these were all confirmed by different sources. So clearly they kind of knew what was going on and that all of this indeed was true. So the fact that they accepted a resignation letter, Treliving said that Bill Peters offered to resign, but I really can't imagine that's the case. This is just, like I said, legally speak. I would think that they kind of came to the conclusion together that this was something that they were willing to let him do, but was kind of obviously forced upon him. They were not going to be having him back as head coach. He was asked in the press conference if Bill Peters wouldn't have offered to resign, what would have been next steps? Would he have been terminated? And Brad Treliving would not answer the question, said he did not want to get into anything that was speculative or hypothetical, that ultimately they didn't have to go down that road because the resignation was offered up and therefore accepted by the Calgary Flames. But as they were just discussing on Sportsnet, Hockey Central, which I was watching during the press conference, they did indicate, like Justin Bourne was saying, that he kind of felt frustrated that it seems as though nobody's really being held accountable here. Yes, Bill Peters is no longer the coach, but ultimately he did resign. It sounds like they're kind of letting him leave more on his own accord, and there's just no circumstance. There's nothing that's really coming from this situation. So I guess we will see what happens with the future of Bill Peters. I do think personally it's probably pretty unlikely that he ever coaches in the NHL again. Some have speculated that he might be able to get opportunities maybe in overseas, whether it be the KHL or European leagues or anything outside of North America, basically, which probably even then would take some time before that would come about. It's really difficult to say what's going to happen with Bill Peters. For right now, the new Flames coach is Geoff Ward. He's been given the tag of interim head coach. Treliving was asked about what the future plans are. Are they going to start the search for a new head coach? Are they going to give Ward the remainder of the season? What are the plans? All he would really say is that they haven't really gotten all that far yet. For right now, he has confidence that Ward can do the job. He feels of all the guys on the current staff that he would be the best suited for the role. He has confidence in him. He felt it was important for continuity purposes that it was somebody internally that kind of takes over for the time being. So we'll see what happens. They really don't know. So I would say it's probably going to largely depend on how the team does and how it looks as though he's doing as a head coach. He could very well get the rest of the season. If things go well, maybe they'll offer him an extension. Really hard to say. We really don't know. But for today at least, and for the interim temporary basis, Geoff Ward is your next head coach of the Calgary Flames. And based on all the information I've personally seen and know about him as a coach, I do think he does make sense to be, logically here the next coach, and we'll see how he does and if the Flames can respond and how he wants to coach this team and they have some success. Then clearly it would only make sense to keep him on. Brad Treliving was also asked a lot about the background check and what due diligence he completed when hiring Bill Peters. He was asked if he spoke to former employers of Peters. Clearly, because of the Carolina situation, we did hear current Canes head coach Rod Brindamore speak publicly to confirm that what the situation with Michal Jordan, that it did happen. He also discussed how they dealt with it internally, that it was brought to management there with Ron Francis, but it looks as though Ron Francis never brought it to ownership. Former owner Peter Carmanos indicated publicly that if he had known about this situation, he would have fired Bill Peters on the spot. That was his public reaction and opinion here. But of course, we know Ron Francis is no longer with the Hurricanes. He's now the GM of the new franchise in Seattle. And I can't help but wonder if there might be some fallout with that organization and their position there with Mr. Francis. I mean, clearly, if he knew about the situation and chose not to really do anything about it, then I guess we'll see. I mean, obviously, he may have spoken to Peters about it. I don't know. I mean, it looks as though, based on what Rod Brindamore said, was that the coaching staff immediately brought it to management's, desk to make sure that they knew about it, that it was dealt with, and they never heard or seen of another incident again during Peters' remaining time with the organization. So, did he speak to him about it? I guess maybe, but we really don't know the full extent of that. And either way, it looks as though Brad Treliving probably did not speak to Ron Francis, would be my guess, about like a background check based on his time as coach there. Because if that would have been brought to his attention, I would hope that he would not have proceeded to hire him. But, clearly, Bill Peters was the only coach that was interviewed for this position. He was somebody who was handpicked by Brad Treliving. Of course, Brad Treliving was working as one of the GMs with Team Canada for the World Championships, which Bill Peters was coaching. So they did get a chance to work together there, side by side. And clearly they did have, a personal relationship, it looks like, before that outside of the game as well. So it looks as though he didn't probably do a lot of due diligence, in my opinion, because he knew a lot about this person as a coach and as a person on his own accord, and other candidates weren't really considered here. You can't help but wonder if there's going to be any fallout on Brad Treliving now between the Flames ownership, for example. Are they going to question, the process that was gone through to bring in Bill Peters as coach? Now, all this has come to light, and this situation has, reared its face on the organization and put them through a very difficult time here this past week. So that's interesting to find out. And like I said as well, it will be interesting to see if there's any fallout with Ron Francis in Seattle. I did see an article already online, I can't remember who wrote it, indicating, could Ron Francis ever be let go from Seattle before they ever play their first game? I guess it's possible, but I guess we really have no clue on how that's going to go. We don't really know what was done between Ron Francis and Bill Peters, and once he was made aware of that situation and happened in the Hurricanes organization. So I guess there could be more fallout from this, and there could be more fallout for other coaches. It's really difficult to say. It seems like this past week has been a very telling tale. A lot of players finding a voice and speaking out about things that were very concerning to them. So I guess we'll see what happens. We very well could see a shift in how a lot of the coaches are hired and what kind of process teams go through in doing background checks and whatnot to make sure that they're not going to have any more situations like this pop up in the future, because it's clearly very, very difficult on the organization. We could tell from a very emotional Brad Treliving today, and he did confirm this is by far the hardest thing he's had to deal with in his management career as a hockey manager. So I guess we'll see what happens from here. But let me know your thoughts on the follow-up from the Bill Peters situation. Or do you think letting him resign was the right thing? Should they have terminated? At the end of the day here, it's the same result. He's no longer the coach of the Flames. A lot of that has to do with lawyer speak, basically, and whether or not they had to pay him or not pay him, and all the terms that whether or not he's going to get paid or not is not something that Brad Treliving would discuss. I would think with the resignation that they likely would not be on the hook to pay his salary, but he would not confirm that in a press conference. So I guess we may never know 100% for sure either. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section, and we'll continue discussing further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.